Aerial Services will be hosting our third webinar in the 2014 Winter Series entitled Privacy Issues Raise Concerns for Remote Sensing on Wednesday, March 26th. Please keep an eye on your email inbox for your invite, or you can also visit aerialservicesinc.com/webinars for more information and to register. I am now pleased to introduce my colleague, Aerial Services Southeast Region Geospatial Solutions Consultant, Rob Marchman, who will share his expert knowledge with you today. Rob has been employed with Aerial Services since 2013 and has been employed in the geospatial profession for 27 years. He is also a GIS professional. Rob's core competencies are in large account management, contract negotiation, budgeting and cost control, and client relationship management. He is also very knowledgeable in aerial image acquisition, LiDAR and corridor mapping, and digital orthophotography. Rob received his Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Alabama and is based out of Gunnersville, Alabama. Thank you, Rob, for being here with us today.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us. My name is Rob Marchman, and over my 27 years in this business, I have seen many different tactics used to acquire professional mapping services. So today, I hope to highlight some of the ways I have seen which could easily be classified as how not to produce a procurement, along with some of the pitfalls, but I'll also go into some of the how-tos, or better ways to engage a professional services mapping firm. There are lots of ideas about what to do and what not to do. So for this webinar, I've come up with what I think are 5 commonly seen tactics for putting out an RFP. Some of you have probably seen these in your experiences, and my experience in this business has shown these to be all too common. Kind of an agenda for the day. We'll start out with lots of how not to's and realize some of the information will be tongue-in-cheek just to help get the point across. We'll finish with a few suggestions and some reason and logic, which is better known as the how-tos. Any questions can be submitted via text, as Amy said, and we will respond directly if there's not time to respond today. It'll be roughly about 40 minutes, and if I cannot, in all good conscience, answer your questions on the spot, I will contact you back directly. So with that, let's get started. So 5 ideas of the 20th century. I decided to first list what I call 5 common, okay, great, procurement ideas of the 20th century. Note, I did not say the 21st century, as these ideas have been carried over for a long, long time. Some of these can even be taken tongue-in-cheek, if you will. I will list these 5 ideas and then go into a little depth on each one. So number 1, send out a request for information, a RFI, first. Always a good idea to get the companies on the vendor list to fill out every last detail you or your purchasing department can possibly come up with. Gather all the information you can and make the potential vendors reveal everything there is to know about their company. Second, only send out the RFP to a few firms, and maybe those you already know. And by all means, keep the total number in a single digit. I'll suggest why this is used in a few minutes. Third, state in your cover letter or the instructions that you absolutely do not go with low bid, and that lowest price is not the guiding factor to winning your project. You can also state how proposals will be evaluated, any point system that might be used, or how a ranking will be performed. State all of this, even if deep down the first thing you actually do is turn to the pricing quotation under tab 7, on page 93. Fourth, put out an RFP that is specific to a certain vendor. Company. Is it just me, or many of you always thought vendor was a term used by the hot dog and pizza vendors in New York City? So from now on, I'm going to delete the term vendor. It just doesn't sound right. You know, certainly in describing a professional services mapping company. You know, doctors provide professional services, but I've never seen them listed in the yellow pages as brain surgeon vendors. There we go. That's better. And fifth, certainly make it easy on purchasing. Whatever you do, you know, purchasing's overworked, understaffed, so keep it easy. So there are 5 ideas that I have identified, and I am sure all of you can come up with additional examples, and I'll probably hear from you. So let's go back to number 1 and see what we can learn about each great idea. So what do you gain by sending out an RFI first? Well, after all, RFI gives you a lot of free information and protects you with the boss and can give you a star in the job security column. It appears more professional. It shows you're serious about vetting out possible contractors. And yes, it makes you appear more professional in your procurement approach. You may believe the company is responding will look at your RFP as one they feel will be totally objective. Hey, pre-consulting. With all the FUD factor, as I call it, of these, you know, a massive RFI response, there should be volumes of information which you could use as free consulting. And you may be able to save some money by not hiring anyone like an outside consultant, you know, to help you with the RFP. All you have to do is pick out what you need from the RFIs and build the RFP from there. Good luck with that. Fourthly, you believe you will know who the serious players are by those who respond both to the RFI and the request for proposal. It's an expensive proposition to respond to both, so often the thought here is that with 2 documents to prepare, you know, maybe months apart, of course, those responding to both have more interest than others, and this will, in essence, narrow the field. At least that's the thought. Okay, on to the second great idea. If you only send the RFI and RFP out to a few firms you already know, what does this do for you? What do you think you gain? Well, first of all, it's safe. It's safe because you probably want to ignore possible new ideas and the latest technology advances. You know all these new advances are too uncertain and not mainstream yet, and you are looking for tried and true results, right? This also has that, let's call it the let's get it over with feeling. And besides, you can still leave at 4:30 sharp and get in 18 holes of golf all summer long. It's certainly quick. I mean, the fewer firms, the better. They are most likely all alike by now and pretty much have the same technology you thought, so you might as well use the one most everybody else is using when it comes right down to it. Besides, you know who you want the contract to go to anyway. The idea here is to say, let's make this as painless as possible to everyone here. We'll get decent results. Or maybe you're retiring in a couple of years and it doesn't really matter. Yep, it's less work. You don't really have time to do all this reading, so the fewer responses, the better. Thus, the less work, the better. You know, reading and understanding these technical responses is pretty hard work, and when you don't understand all there is to know, it makes it even harder. A little later, I'll talk about how the written technical approaches can be thoroughly understood, even if you're not an expert. Lots of people just want to keep their workload down. And it's easy. The purchasing agent will like it that there are only a few firms submitting. Again, purchasing is probably overworked, understaffed, so let's keep it simple and make it as easy as possible. And better yet, with a big sigh of relief, you just get to hit the easy button on this one. Okay, now to the third great procurement idea? Certainly, it's a safe statement to make to gain the most responses when you say you're not going to go low bid. You could also say we will contract with only the best qualified firm. And again, it protects you, protects the boss, and the boss might even be an elected official, by the way, and that is certainly important. Also, by stating you do not go low bid makes the boss look good too, and has the appearance that the group or department putting out the RFP really knows how to procure professional services. What else can happen? Well, if the companies you sent the RFP out to believe you do not go low bid, you might just get more higher price responses. You may think this is a way to get those high price responses, which may even solidify your pre-choice for the project. The problem with this is sometimes this can backfire on you. If you gain more higher price responses, the thought is it will help you, again, ensure your pre-selected contractor will be awarded the work, which might be a goal in the first place. Well, what else can happen? Now let's look at the fourth great idea. Sometimes these company-specific things, when the RFP is really kind of geared to a certain company, are kind of thinly disguised. They're really a signal that you've already decided who you'll select, and seasoned companies these days can sniff them out. This type of contracting has been going on for a long time. Call it the good old boy relationships or whatever, but most firms have become experts at seeing through the veil and can spot RFPs that are targeted to one potential company. So be careful if this is an approach that is being considered. There are ways around this, of course. Even though you think you're appearing objective here and listening to everyone's ideas on how to make this a great project, and if they believe you do not go low bid, thinking you will receive more higher price responses, there's a danger with this approach. When companies see this happening, many will just pull back and not invest really the thousands of dollars in staff hours it takes to even send in a proposal, because they've seen this before and just do not want to be another company on the list that has a near zero chance of being selected. Next, if you publish the list of companies, you might think it shows you're being objective and makes it appear that there is really fair and open competition. And after all, isn't that what you want? Finally, this fourth tactic, this tactic ensures that you're limiting the award and therefore are not interested in who may be coming in with newer and better technology to solve your mapping needs. You know, new technology may even be less expensive. So maybe it's wise to hear about what advances have been made. Or maybe you're thinking that new technology cannot be trusted until it's mainstream and just do not want to be bothered by it, this go around. Okay? On to the fifth great procurement idea. And this goes back to the good old purchasing department, which is usually endorsed or even recommended by purchasing, especially since mapping is such a technical profession. So make it easy on purchasing so no one has to go through the angst and the learning curve of understanding how to evaluate companies who are suggesting, technology advances and maybe some things that you have never even heard of. And, of course, this leads you to letting purchasing just be able to press that good old easy button. Well, there you go. Voila, it's done, yes? Well, if any of you watch college football game day, I'm a Southern guy, so I watch a lot of college game day. When the winners are being prognosticated by the other and often uninformed broadcasters, plus some celebrity guest who also stars on a TV show, but went to that same college anyway, so that's why they invited him, because, you know, it's all about ratings, of course. Towards the end of that segment, and just before Corso puts on his choice of the winning school's mascot's headpiece, Corso says what? Not so fast, my friend. I mean, after deciding to put out an RFI, RFP, the reasons behind using tried and true procurement ideas, you then kind of need to look at the way the RFP is written, better known as the art of writing a solicitation, and it can be an art or not. Having a well-written RFP on the street can be likened to a successful creative writing exercise, depending on how you approach the actual content. The thought that this should be easy is a myth, but many believe there are ways to take shortcuts and make it easy, or at least easier. So here are a few ideas on how not to write a solicitation. First of all, cut and paste. This is probably a favorite. Just cut and paste from 2 or 3 proposals that have been sent to you by others or friends at other agencies who agreed to help you, since that is the way they put their RFP together. And they said it worked out okay for them. So, you know, it'll probably work out okay for you. Secondly, and by all means, you want to have unclear specifications where you have to end up comparing, say, apples and rhinos. Sure, that sounded better than apples and oranges. Besides, you've already decided on the company you want to award the contract to. Well, it doesn't really matter, does it? Don't ensure all technical requirements are sufficiently described. The thought here might be, if the companies you send the RFP to aren't savvy enough to know the technical requirements, then they probably should not be considered anyway. The problem with this approach is, as technology advances, there are requirements, you know, specific to certain sensors, certain deliverables, feature code lists, which kind of clearly define the deliverables. And if you are vague or incomplete stating all the requirements, then the proposers will be miles apart with their responses, and comparisons will really end up being very difficult. If you just write the RFP and decide not to have it reviewed by another set of eyes because you have copied most of it from previous RFPs and you believe it to be, you know, a spot-on document, that's also a risky proposition, especially if you want to ensure that it is clear and aligned with your actual needs. Some may think that having a procurement reviewed for technical clarity and having, you know, the I's and T's dotted and crossed isn't really important, because most companies will respond the way they want to anyway. They'll just send in their standard boilerplate response to each section. And that's a bad supposition, by the way. Or maybe, you know, maybe you've done this before and it turned out, okay, you can just answer any and all questions as they come in. And many times they'll just keep on coming. So don't worry about any final revision before sending it out, and just deal with the consequences as they happen. You know, after all, you're brain dead now, and so is purchasing from all the cutting and pasting anyway. So just get the RFP out the door, ready or not. And fifth, use the same specs as last year, and the year before, and the year before that. I mean, after all, technology and innovation in the tried and true world of mapping never occurs close together anyway. Well, wrong again. And by the time a 1 or 2 year project is completed, technology has usually taken another leap. And it's not always just a baby step forward either. Watch for that and stay up to date. You know, you should meet with several companies face-to-face and gain a thorough understanding of what really is the current state of the technology, where it may be headed, and what may develop during the course of a new project or an update project or whatever you're going through, go to conferences, if at all possible, and see for yourself where the technology is leading. No matter how close a relationship you have had with a certain company in the past, seek out those advancing the technology and those with first-class references. 6, set minimum technical and performance requirements. And by the way, set them good and low. This tactic's really great for those who would like to remain status quo with previous and maybe outdated mapping technology. If you set them low enough, then everyone can bid. Except that includes the outdated and the unqualified too that you'll have to sift through. On the other hand, one way to avoid considering outdated technology and companies who are not keeping up is to ask for references by name and phone number, and make certain these references are checked by the stakeholders in your project. Just because references are listed may not give you the whole story unless you actually call them and have the conversation. Also, you can specify the actual flight heights. That's a great idea. You know, if you want your imagery and LiDAR acquired, you know, go ahead and tell them how to fly. After all, aren't all sensors the same? Well, companies these days really do know what the specifications are based on the desired results to be achieved, you know, such as 6-inch pixel, 3-inch pixel, 1-foot contour, 6 inches, whatever, a dim. Trust them to supply the solutions which meet your requirements and have them explain it in their response. The deliverable probably will not require a U2 or the band either, for that matter. Okay, we've been through 5 great procurement ideas of the 20th century, pushed, pulled, and dragged into the 21st century, along with how not to write a solicitation and some of the pitfalls there. Next, we go to the subject of low bid contractor selection. And here are 6, let's call them tongue-in-cheek reasons to go low bid anyway. You love subpar contract staffing and late deliverables, so go low bid. You know, you can also achieve marginal technical accomplishment and even some cost overruns. This is really a highly likely outcome if low bid's your sole criteria for awarding a contract. Again, just turning to the pricing proposal at the end of the document leaves you with a cost really firmly planted in your mind and possibly a predetermined bias that the project can be performed for a cost, you know, less than what you anticipated it would be. If you open all the pricing pages first from every response and you are set to choose the lowest cost, an unintended bias is kind of firmly planted in your mind because you've already seen those prices. You may want to believe you can have the project delivered for this cost, but if you start reading the details in the proposals, it may prove to be a lack of understanding of the deliverables. So do not assume your low bidder understands the deliverables just because you're deliriously happy knowing their price point in advance. Go low bid so contractors can pay the lowest possible amount to the least qualified staff. Well, they'll also be encouraged to cut corners, and this will result in maybe even helping keep unemployment high. Sometimes, if not stated in the RFP, contractors may find the hungriest offshore firm in India or China or wherever these days who promises excellent work for a fraction of the U.S. production cost. This way they can make a long dollar by offshoring and subcontracting much of the work. This is both a dangerous situation for the contracting company and you, the customer. In order to avoid this situation, state in bold letters in your solicitation that non-U.S. labor and production is strictly prohibited. You know, a key indicator someone might be using this technique anyway is the fact that their proposal has an artificially low price compared to many other companies' prices, which may be, you know, fairly bunched close together in cost. this would really be a good time when you should address the question about possible offshore labor being used before making the contract award. Go low bid and enjoy adversarial relationships. Poor relationships with your providers will probably result as their performance slides, and your unrealistic expectations of timeliness and quality will be eroding also. Low-cost providers have to cut costs, and sometimes procedures which result in low-quality deliverables, such as not performing a thorough QC of the data before it's delivered, and by waiting on you, the customer, to do the QC and notify the company of the discrepancies, or the QC by customer approach. Software companies are really good at this, and they often employ this method by releasing, say, version 1.2 of their software when it's really only version 1.1 at best, and they wait for the user community to find the bugs and the problems. Go low bid. You must love explaining to your board why more money is needed to get the job done, or the deliverables received are subpar. There's nothing like having to send back data that is incomplete, inaccurate, and frankly just looks bad on the screen, just to have it redone. When this happens, red flags go up everywhere, and delays begin mounting. There are times when this totally backfires, and the original contractor has to be replaced by a company who has better mastery of the technology and can deliver the prescribed data with quality. Go low bid because there's no need to have confidence in the data, or that the data received really is fit for its intended use. Nothing like having to put on hold deliverables because it's found that the data is not giving those results. You do not want to be thinking, if we had only selected some other firm. In this case, to prevent this from happening, it's good to have a pilot project in place and fully reviewed for its performance within your system before authorizing regular production and deliverables to begin. This takes a little time and might slow down the project deliverables at first, but will be very much worth it in the long run, as subsequent deliverables will run much more smoothly. You don't care about the best way, just the lowest cost. Budgets are tight, and you need to get this done as cheaply as possible. So just the cheapest will do this time. Well, surely by now the reasoning for going low bid is showing many areas where failure is likely. If for some reason lowest bidder is the mandated law of your organization and there is nothing you can do to overturn such an edict, then you are stuck with the lowest price bidder, and it does in fact become a bid and not a professional services proposal and evaluation. It simply becomes an Amazon-like pick the lowest provider transaction. So just for some fun, for comparison, to help illustrate the point, there are also some areas in real life where low bid is not the wisest personal choice either. It is a good example of how lowest cost or cheapest solution is not the way to go. For instance, good old $49.95 brake job by your next door neighbor, a self-declared mechanic who also uses discount superstore, i.e. the wrong brake fluid. You may have saved $75, but, or how about a rebuilt water pump? Nice way to get a steam facial when you open the hood, leave you stranded on the side of a two-lane road in the middle of nowhere, where Rufus, the shade tree mechanic, is the only guy around who says he can fix it in a day or two. And retread tires, that good as new deal, supposedly, and then having them come apart going 70 on I-285 around Atlanta. Well, you'll certainly make the traffic report news, and this is just a disaster waiting to happen. Or an exploding Jeep battery from North Korea. Well, the point here is, in all these instances, low bid by choice to save money in the short term results in a much higher likelihood of being stranded or worse, and will actually cost more in the long run. Likewise, when low bid is your sole criteria for contract award, you could also easily get burned. Lastly, I figure I should move away from the vehicle examples with one more. How about an Iranian shotgun for 88 bucks? This one would probably result in the loss of your lower leg and foot at the same time. Yet another bad choice. So you get the point. Low bid, lowest cost, cheapest production methods, etc. They are all cheap for a reason. And most often that reason is a loss or lack of quality. Okay, moving on. A couple of famous quotes, one which we've probably all heard from Aldo Gucci: bitterness of poor quality is remembered long after the sweetness of low prices faded from memory. Another one of my favorites is by William Foster, who, by the way, was a World War II Medal of Honor recipient. Quality is never an accident. I kind of truncated this one, actually. Quality is never an accident. It represents the wise choice of many alternatives. I always like the word wise. It's much better than smart, don't you think? So moving on, here are some facts why lowest price contractor selection is inappropriate for professional services. Why is that? Well, number one, by definition, these are professional services, like doctors, defense attorneys, architects, nuclear contractors, and LiDAR and mapping providers. By definition alone, I would not recommend you just looking at low price as the sole determining factor for a professional services contract award. This is truly a you get what you pay for situation. After all, would you go to the in and out in an hour $500 LASIK eye surgery clinic in a mall? Well, not me. Some things are just too scary and far too important to go low bid with. Professional mapping services are certainly in that classification. Apply this strategy and everybody loses. Well, if you have unsuitable procurements, both the client and the provider loses. So before you contract, figure out what you truly need to provide in the RFP to receive accurate answers, and make all the arrangements so that the contractor isn't spending valuable time trying to get basic requirements met. Ambiguous language just leads to many phone calls and a host of questions to be answered during the proposal writing period by the contractors. And you certainly don't want to produce more questions than answers once you have released a procurement. If a government entity, we all lose taxes because our taxes are being wasted on inefficient and possibly unsafe and unneeded low-value services. You know, government waste is rampant enough, but it doesn't have to be. So stay tuned. We're going to have some solutions to this problem. In the end, everybody loses. And the initial satisfaction of saving a few $1,000s is often overshadowed by the burden of poor contractor performance, which is another perfect reference to Gucci's quote. Also, the old saying, penny wise, pound foolish, applies here too. Do-overs are costly, both for the contractor and the customer. If you're willing to live with such deliverable difficulties, then you must have a substantial staff of technically savvy analysts or have retained a QC consultant to deal with the potential problems. Overloading staff due to poor contractor performance is simply not worth the imagined savings of going low bid. So with these negative results you have seen from low bid selection, what is the solution? To make as certain as possible you are hiring the right firm to deliver what you really need to accomplish as the end goal. Well, here it is, the well-proven best practice for awarding a professional service contract. And that's by following the Brooks Act for qualifications-based selection. You know, the Brooks Act is almost 42 years as it was originally written, and even the amended law in 1989 is now 25 years old this year. and yet it's still not universally used. These days, many contracting agencies have become, unfortunately, transaction-based rather than qualifications-based, or lowest bidder without consideration as to which firm would provide the best value. And as the late Andy Rooney would say, why is that? Well, many times it's the written law, and the precept is that if all the potential contractors are considered as qualified, then the logical choice must be the one with the lowest price. Sometimes that's a difficult position to argue, especially if the choice is up to elected officials in a public meeting where they are, quote, spending the taxpayers' dollars. There is always someone who will protest the expenditure if it does not go to the low bidder. You know, elected official must really be prepared for such a situation and be able to explain why the best value company was chosen rather than the one with the lowest price. So be prepared to defend your selection when using the QBS process. Since we're going to be discussing qualifications, then we move from the other acronyms used so far, that being RFI and RFP, and add the term QBS. And in reality, QBS is fairly simple and very logical. Under the Brooks Act method of contracting, the document provided to potential contractors is named a request for qualifications, in which proof is required that the company submitting its qualifications is fully qualified to perform the tasks that are set forth in the specified deliverables. So this first item, where RFQ needs to be clear by setting out minimum selection criteria, should actually separate those firms which are qualified versus those who cannot meet the minimum specification. For instance, if the RFQ states that you must submit evidence that your company has performed work of a similar nature and size and scope for at least 3 projects over the past 3 years, that is a very clear requirement. You know, if a company only has 1 or 2 projects, then that company does not meet the minimum selection criteria and must therefore be disqualified if they submit a proposal. This is true for all complex acquisitions where past performance is really proof critical. And I will note that under the rules, if it's a commodity and not a service, where past performance is irrelevant, then even new companies must be considered under the law. You know, defining the scope that optimizes value, there's really not enough that can be said about that. You select the most qualified firm after a thorough reading by more than one individual, hopefully, who really knows the technology. If you yourself do not thoroughly understand the merits of, you know, different technical proposal statements, then hire someone who does. Technology has been moving at light speed, literally, with LiDAR in particular. Find a truly independent consultant who, without bias, will read and recommend and possibly even rank the firms who are deemed as qualified to perform the work. And a word on pricing proposals. Since you are deciding a ranking of companies based only on their highest qualifications ranking, you must have the pricing proposal submitted in a separate sealed envelope and secured until the top firm has been selected with whom you want to negotiate. Therefore, do not open any pricing proposals until the rankings are complete, as you have committed to the Brooks Act method and will be negotiating the price and possibly the scope with the #1 ranked company. Third, it's time to select the most qualified firm. And, you know, based on a thorough reading and understanding of the qualifications alone. This is really not difficult if the reviews have been well understood and the rankings have been, you know, agreed upon by everybody. It's time to select. So by now you should feel comfortable with the selected firm. After much vetting, checking of references, and making relevant calls to check the performance claims made in the qualification statements, you're in a good position to negotiate the final scope of work. It may be that the selected firm will have some additional suggestions to make the project even better than what you thought it could be or what you intended it to be with the deliverables that you put forth. Maybe the company will add something very useful or a low-cost extra deliverable as a bonus. The key here is that since you are negotiating the final scope of work and listening to this highly qualified firm, there may be added deliverables suggested which you have not even thought about, and even some cost savings could be found. And this is really one of the flexibilities that the Brooks Act contracting method allows for. So fifth, you're ready to retain the most qualified firm. Finally, through all these steps, you have stated the scope and qualifications required to submit. You've ranked and selected the most qualified firm in your eyes and negotiated the price and final scope and maybe even made improvements in the final product. And you have agreed with your new contractor and partner on how this will all come about. The good thing now is that all you have to do is actually retain the firm, sign the contract, and go. So, what are the good things about qualifications-based selection, QBS? Number one, if you cannot come to an agreement with your first pick, move on to the second most qualified firm. The pre-ranking of firms allows you to do this seamlessly and without pain. And insurance, beauty of the Brooks Act. The insurance provided with this contracting approach is that the second and third firm on the list are both qualified. So how much better could that get? You have actually pre-qualified more than one firm if, for instance, you design from a pool of, say, 9 responses that the top 3 to even 5 companies are all qualified, and you place them in a ranked order of preference, you're covered. So if you cannot negotiate in good faith with number 1 or even number 2, well, again, there's no pressure here, as there are several other firms who are also qualified. Just move through the process. It's a beautiful thing. Good specifications and the project approach devised in your consultation with the experts really have minimized, but maybe not eliminated, the risk that the client will get an unqualified firm or substandard performance. So with identified and qualified backup contractors, Plan B, if you will, firmly set in place, you can feel even more confident in your selection process, as the insurance that you will receive the best job possible leads to extremely high confidence in the results. Okay, now some takeaways about what we have been talking about today as we wrap up this webinar. You know, be smart and get the best deal, get the best value. Consider all the stakeholders in your group, if there are a lot of stakeholders, and not just necessarily your needs. Listen to everybody's input and get the best firm with the highest value for every participant. You know, professional services aren't paper clips. We all talk about the most bang for the buck, but if you take out bang and insert the synonym value, and few questions will ever arise about why you selected the contractor you did. Professional services are just that, not to be confused with a kid who cuts your grass for 20 bucks because he's your neighbor's son, or a generic product off the shelf where you cannot tell, you know, one brand from the other. You know, realize every geospatial project is unique, and it requires sophisticated technology and really the seasoned judgment of professionals to balance, you know, thousands of factors. Deal with the most value for your stakeholders. If you're not fully up to date on the technology available, contract with a firm that also might be a consultant, by the way, who really is. There are a few pure GIS consulting firms in our business who are totally independent and do not have any direct involvement with individual mapping firms. They are known for being unbiased and provide excellent advice on how to procure professional geospatial mapping services. Longevity in business is one distinguishing factor, and stellar references are another. look for both. Find the best value with clear specs for your projects. And how do you accomplish this? Again, by writing solicitations clearly and selecting firms based on qualifications, not price. If you'll take these 4 statements and make certain everyone on the selection team understands the goal of getting the highest value for the job at hand, then the project will run more smoothly for everyone, your stakeholders and your contractor, your partner as well. Now for some final thoughts. I've alluded to this a couple of times. The company or consultant is a team member. Once in contract, remember you have selected the company or consultant to be on your team. Treat them as a team member, just as your stakeholders are, as they will have the same goals as you for producing a job well done. Be amicable and open in all your conversation, and laying out all the cards on the table will go a long way to ensuring a successful project. Be a considerate partner, and companies will bend over backward to be of assistance and ensure their value to you. If you treat them as like an adversary, just look for less success. If there's tension and an adversarial relationship results, the company doing the work cannot really do their work well, and they will have far less personal investment in your success. And frankly, the team synergy will just not gel as well as it could. And that really wraps it up. Here are a couple of additional resources for you to check out concerning pricing and procurement.